Genesis chapter 33 tonight. Genesis 33. Hopefully you remember where we are in the story of Jacob. He had spent 20 years in Padan Aram. He's on his way home. We started looking at that journey home last week, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago in Genesis 32. And in that chapter, as he's nearing home, as he's nearing the place where his brother Esau awaits, he gets some disconcerting news that Esau already knows he's on his way and that Esau's cutting him off at the pass. Esau is heading out to meet him. That makes Jacob extremely nervous. He starts to put some pieces in place. He starts to work his plan first. Ultimately, he brings it down to prayer. He finally does pray and ask the Lord to intervene, ask the Lord to help him. And then that night before he is to meet up once again with his brother Esau, he has an experience with the Lord where he is wrestling with the Lord. And remember, we said 2 weeks ago, he lost that fight miserably, but yet at the same time, he won that fight gloriously. Because in that fight, he was losing some control over his life. It was a major step toward his sanctification, but don't think that Jacob has everything together just yet. Don't think there was a magic switch of sanctification that just instantly changed his character, calmed him down, enabled him to fully trust the Lord and not rely on his scheming and his planning. And don't expect Jacob to still not wrestle with some of those things that he did before, like dishonesty, deception. But be encouraged because he is a man in progress. He's a work in progress. He's a man in the making. The Lord is starting something in him major. And we're going to see some mistakes in this chapter. We're also going to see some good in this chapter. And the further you go into Jacob's story, the more good you see. I just love the fact that by the time the Lord gets us all to the end of our lives, we're supposed to resemble a whole lot more the character and nature of Jesus Christ than we did when we first got saved. I know I'm not, we say it a lot, I'm not the person that I could be, but I'm not the person I once was. And it's so true, and I'm so grateful for that. When I look back at the person I was, and I remember it well, I am so grateful that I am the person I am today. Yes, I wish I could have made more progress with the Lord. I wish I could be more like him than I am right now. But I'm so grateful that I'm not the same person that I was back when I got saved or a few years after I got saved. So just remember that when you are examining the lives of other Christians. Don't think, man, of how terrible they are. How can a Christian be that terrible of a person? No. Think of this. How terrible would they be if they didn't have the Lord in their life and working? They're not a finished product. The Lord is working on them. See it in Jacob's story here in Genesis 33. Cut yourself some slack, but also use it as fuel to press in, to get deeper, to know the Lord more personally. So let's take a look here at Genesis chapter 33. The continuation of this reunion between Jacob and Esau. Verse 1. Now Jacob lifted his eyes, and behold, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. That would be his two additional wives. Verse 2. And he put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children behind or next, and then Rachel and Joseph last. Now, this is kind of awful when you really look at what Jacob has just done. He knows his brother is around the corner, and what he does is he stacks the deck by order of importance. Out there on the fringe of the encampment, the location that Esau is going to come to first, who does he stick out there? His two maidservants. So the two concubines, you might say, and the children that he had with those concubines. They're out there. In other words, they're just like left to it. They are thrown out to the dogs, so to speak. so that if things go badly, they're the first to go. They're the sacrificial ones. They're getting sacrificed so that the rest have some warning and they can flee. They can escape to safety. And then next in that order of importance, in that layer of favoritism, we have Leah, his first wife, but not his first wife by preference of love. But he has Leah and the children that he had with Leah there in the middle. So, if something happens that they overtake, if things go very badly and Esau attacks with his 400 men and they overtake that first group, the handmaidens and those kids, and the second group doesn't have enough time to get away, okay, then the second group will be sacrificed too. But then at the very back, as far away from the front line as possible, he has the love of his heart, Rachel. And the one kid that he's had with Rachel so far. As of now, Rachel's only had one kid. So you're seeing what Jacob is doing with the family. He is showing favoritism. He's picking his favorites. We've talked about this in a previous study, so I don't feel the need to berate you parents about not showing favoritism to your kids, not picking your favorites and making it obvious to the other kids that that's your favorite. But I would like to just, since we're here, drop this in. When you start right here and then move forward in the story, you're going to realize that what Jacob did right here by showing this favoritism is just the beginning of a pattern of behavior from Jacob that is going to cause his favorite son, Joseph, a whole lot of pain in the future. What I'm saying is that all eyes were watching this. Do you think that the handmaidens and their kids and Leah and her kids, do you think they don't see what Jacob has just done? And so in the near future, all of those kids from Leah and the handmaidens are going to use that as a sore spot to begin to plan to do away with Joseph. So it's bad right from the beginning here that Jacob would do this. Daddy's favorite. So what you're already beginning to see here in Genesis chapter 33, verses 1 and 2, is the struggle between Jacob and Israel that's taking place in the same person. All right, because he has prayed about this issue. He's prayed, Lord, when I meet up with my brother, I'm praying that it goes well. Lord, I'm praying that I have your blessing. I'm praying that I don't get wiped out. I'm praying that you protect me. And what Jacob is doing already here is showing a lack of faith by doing what he's doing. So it's that internal struggle. I know he wrestled with the Lord in Genesis 32. It looked like, man, that was it. The issue was solved. Israel, he's now Israel, governed by God, and not Jacob, the deceiving one, the tricky one that's living by his own scheming. And yet we see still here in Genesis chapter 33, that internal struggle is still taking place. We should not be surprised to see it. We know that the Bible tells us in the New Testament, specifically in the writings of Paul, that the flesh is at war against the spirit. You have two natures within you. You know this stuff well. You have two natures within you. You have the fleshly nature. You have the body, the fleshly nature with its fallen desires. And when you are converted and come to Christ and his life is breathed into you, you now have the spirit within you. And those two natures are constantly warring with one another. I think normally when we get on this topic, we share the story of the old Indian that said there are two dogs within every person fighting, a white dog and a black dog. And then he was asked, well, which one wins? And that wise old Indian chief said, well, whichever one I feed. And that's what it comes down to. You can get your spirit strong so that your spirit, as Paul would say, is constantly crucifying every day your flesh. It's winning that battle, but that battle is always going to be there. So the key is get your spirit strong, not your flesh strong. Don't feed your flesh, feed your spirit so that when the flesh rises up, your flesh can suppress it, not do away with it. It's never going to do away with it, not until you lay that body down in the grave. Oh, glorious day that's going to be. But until then, that battle's going to be there. So you feed the right nature within you. Well, Jacob is struggling internally as Jacob keeps trying to pop out, even though the Lord said, you're no longer Jacob, you're Israel. You think of the Apostle Peter, who the Lord changed his name. You remember that? His name was Simon, which meant shifting sand. And the Lord changed his name from shifting sand to Peter, which meant a rock. And you know when the Lord did that? The Lord changed his name long before his character changed. He changed Simon's name when Simon was still very much Simon. But see, the Lord could do that because once the process of sanctification begins in a person's life, the Lord has this miraculous ability to not only see you where you are right now, but to see you in your potentiality. He is able to look into your future. He's able to see what kind of person that you're going to be, and he's able to call you by that future person that you are. That's what he did with Peter. How long did it take for Jacob to become more like Israel? How long did it take for Simon to become more like Peter? Well, it took them both a while, just like it takes us a while. But I'm so thankful that the Lord has that ability, because when we come to him and that process of sanctification happens, he can then start to view us in Christ. Those are very important words in the New Testament, in Christ. We are the righteousness of God in and of ourselves. No, it's not what it says. We're not the righteousness of God in and of ourselves. We are the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus. It's when our lives are enveloped and consumed by the righteousness and the sacrifice of Jesus that we can then be viewed as righteous, right? It's like right before service tonight, I had gone a long time today without eating. I was rushing, very busy today because I had to squeeze in a nap, but that's beside the point. But that made me very busy, and so I was rushed and I was starved, and I asked Maggie if she would get me some burgers from next door. It is nice living right next to McDonald's. That is such a blessing from the Lord. I know the Lord divinely orchestrated that. But she goes and she gets me some burgers, and those burgers are up here on the stage. You realize that, right? Those burgers are up here on the stage. Now, you can't see that. You wouldn't want to right now. You can't see that because those burgers are inside of me. They're in me. And it's the same way with Christ. When he looks at us not in the practical realities of what we are. He looks at us not in our inability to be righteous in our own flesh, but he looks at us in Christ, as if we are completely enveloped by Christ. That's how he sees us. That's the only way that he can see us righteous. We're told in Isaiah, we are robed in the righteousness of Christ. You know what that means? It's not your own filthy rags that are showing God righteousness. That's not what he sees. Isn't that what the Bible says? All our righteousness is as filthy rags. But if you're wearing those filthy rags and you're robed in the righteousness of Christ, as Isaiah teaches, what do you see? You don't see the filthy rags. You don't see the burger. You see the righteousness. You see the external covering of the righteousness of Christ. So, Jacob, we're going to have to look at him with eyes of potential right now, just even as the Lord is and even as the Lord does with you. Verse 3. Then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Now, it may seem like a bold and confident move from Jacob that he pushes through now these groups of his family and heads right to the front of the line to meet Esau. But if you look at the manner he comes in, it's still, in my opinion, just not sitting right with me. He comes in, he bows himself to Esau 7 times. 7 is the number of completion. So this is his way of saying, Esau, I'm in complete surrender. You remember 2 weeks ago, Esau, you're the Lord. I'm the servant. I'm in a submissive role here. I'm in complete surrender. The fighting is done. The scheming is over. I'm no longer trying to get your stuff, Esau. I'm a different man. The Lord's done some work in me. I'm not perfect, but I'm a different man. I come in surrender. Verse 4, but Esau ran to meet him. At this point, still no indicators if this is a fight or a happy reunion. Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck. Stop right there. I would say there's still real no indicator of what's happening here. If you were watching this from the outside, you don't know if this is a warm hug or a heated headlock. You're not really sure what's happening. You read and it says that he fell on his neck. It kind of reminds me of a TV episode I seen many years ago where this really old man felt like he was coming to the end of his life, and so he hired these pilots in a small commuter private plane to fly him out to see his brother so that he could bury the hatchet with his brother. He said, me and my brother have had a rift for a very long time, and before I die, I want to go out and I want to make things right. I want to bury the hatchet. So they took him, they flew him to this place in New Mexico where his brother was supposed to have lived. And they get down there, he gets on the ground and he gets out and he sees those two just grab onto each other and, just hugging away. And for a moment, there's a heartfelt moment. They're starting to fight back tears. It's a beautiful moment. And they say, wow, look at how much those two love each other. Look at those hugs. And then before long, they say, wait a minute. I don't think they're hugging. And before long, you realize they're duking it out. He hurries and he comes back into the plane and he says, go, go. And they say, what was that about? He says, well, he had some not so nice things to say about his brother. But then he said, I finally got back my father's watch that he took from me. Go, let's get out of here. He come back. He's got blood hanging out of his nose and everything from the fight. And then as they take off and he starts looking at the watch a little bit longer, he says, you know what? I don't think this is my dad's watch. And come to think of it, my brother doesn't have red hair. Okay, wrong guy. But, they're kind of the same thing. You couldn't tell. Are they hugging? I think they're hugging. No, wait, they're fighting. What does this mean? He fell on his neck. Well, it's not like one of those WWE leg drops on the neck. No, this is an affectionate term in the Old Testament. This means they grabbed a hold of each other and very affectionately, very warmly, they're just hugging it out. You know how it is when you love someone and you haven't seen them for a long time and you finally see them again, and you don't just give them like one of those church hugs. Oh, God bless you, good to see you again. No, you grab onto their neck. You put some muscle behind it. That's a tight hug because there's emotion there. That emotion is saying something that 10,000 words can't say. There's emotion poured into that, and that's what's happening here in verse 4. It is a warm embrace. It is a wonderful moment of reunion, but reconciliation, restoration. A beautiful moment. And reading on, here's where it gets weird. It says that he kissed him and they wept. So he kisses him, in the standard traditional way that you would in that culture. He kisses him on the cheeks, I hope. And then they're just rolling around on the ground, crying and blubbering together. It's, kind of sentimental and gets you a little nauseous. But it's quite a moment between these two. So everything worked out. Things are okay. He's come back. His brother doesn't want to kill him. His brother misses him. His brother forgives him. His brother loves him. In human terms, church, does Esau not have the right to be a little bit perturbed at what Jacob has done to him? In human terms, he does have the right. Now, we won't say in spiritual terms, but in human terms, we could understand why he'd still be fuming mad after 20 years. Remember the vow? I vow to kill this guy. I'm going to kill my brother as soon as my dad kicks the bucket. Now, his dad's not dead yet, but you can see the vow, the desire to kill his brother is completely gone. And you know what this tells me? This tells me that it was not Jacob's plan that worked. Think about this logically for just a moment. Put some logic and reason behind this. If this guy Esau was sitting at home fuming and stewing on this for 20 years, do you think that when he come out en route to meet Jacob, that a handful of waves of gifts of cattle and sheep and goats are really going to bring about this kind of response from there to there? No. There's no way that he could have been fuming on this for 20 years and then en route to Jacob, his entire demeanor and heart is softened by the gifts, the waves of gifts, the droves of gifts from Genesis 32 have softened him up in this way. No way. It tells me this, that somewhere along the way, the Lord was working on that guy Esau's heart. And it wasn't an easy heart to reach. Esau is not exactly a picture of a spiritual man. He's the exact opposite in the Bible. He's a type, a picture of the flesh, the fleshly nature, the stubbornness. And yet, somewhere along the course of those 20 years, the Lord had been working on the heart of Esau, chipping away at the heart of Esau, softening up the fallow ground in the heart of Esau, so that before Jacob even prayed the prayer the night before, with tears in his eyes, "Oh Lord, I'm so worried. I don't know if you can do this. He's still going to be mad, Lord. I just know it. He's going to want to kill me. Lord, can you protect me?" Long before he prayed that prayer, the Lord had already worked it out. Again, we see a perfectly bad example of wasted emotions on a problem that was never there. The problem was never there. You know what else I think this tells me? I really like this thought, so I hope I'm not wrong. This tells me that prayers, although we think of them in terms of place and time, I personally don't believe prayers are limited to that. I believe that our prayers transcend time and space. Now, the reason I believe that is because the Bible teaches us about the eternality of God, that He does not live in the time and space continuum. He's outside of that. We read in the Old Testament that God knew the beginning before the end before the beginning. He's as if He's watching this as a rerun, right? He already knows how things turn out. He looks into the future. I know we can't, but He looks into the future. He sees what you're praying for, and there are many occasions where I truly believe, unknown to us, God is already working to set things up to answer our prayers that He knows we'll pray in the future. Now, I may be taking this too far, but there are times where people message me with a prayer need, and I'm busy, and I don't see it right away. And then I hear the second bing on my phone, and I get the message, "Oh, thanks for the prayers. The Lord already took care of this." And I think to myself, "Oh no, I didn't even know about the prayer need yet. I didn't even pray." And so I've done this actually on a few occasions. I've took it to prayer anyway, and I've said, "Lord, now I know you've already met this need, but Lord, here's what I would have prayed." And then I still pray for the person as if the need hasn't been solved yet. And of course, I can pray with a whole lot of faith then, because the need's already been met. But I do believe the Lord knows what you're going to pray for tomorrow. He knows what you're going to pray for in the future, and He can already begin lining up things in your life to match those situations. That's what He did for Jacob. Everything, as we said 2 weeks ago, that Jacob put himself through in Genesis 32, at the beginning of Genesis 33, all for nothing. All he needed was that prayer. It wasn't his plan at all. It wasn't his effort at all that had any impact on this situation. It was his prayer. It was God answering his prayer and handling the situation. Verse 5. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." So Esau sees all of the family members and he says, "What's this about? Where did all these people come from? Jacob, when you left, it was just you. And now you've come back with all of these people. What's this about?" Jacob's answer, perfect. "The Lord has blessed me with this." Now, I don't know that the Lord would say, "I gave you your 2 wives and then your 3rd wife and then your 4th." I don't think the Lord would say that. But what a good heart in Jacob to recognize, hey, he's a different guy. He's been even more blessed since leaving home. Look at what the Lord has brought into his life. Look at all the joy. Look at all the love. Sure, there's a lot of problems in there too. But look at what the Lord has done. This was the Lord. Interesting approach. I like it. Verse 6, then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. That's the first group, the closest group. Verse 7, the second group. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed down. Afterward, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Verse 8, then Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company which I met?" And he said, "These are to find favor or grace in the sight of my lord Esau." Now, what Esau has just asked him in verse 8 is, what were all of these waves of gifts about? What's with all the cattle and the sheep and the goats and all of these possessions that you're sending ahead as gifts? Why are you doing that? Look carefully at Jacob's answer. He says, here's why I did this. Here's why I sent the gifts. He says, I sent these in order to find favor or grace in the sight of my lord Esau. Did you catch it? Do you see a problem with Jacob's motive? Esau, I'm sending these gifts ahead. I'm sending all of these presents, all of this wealth ahead so that I can win your grace. That's the word that's used in the King James Version Bible. Now, what does the word grace mean? Unmerited, unearned, undeserved favor. So did you catch it? Jacob is trying to earn Esau's unearned favor. So you call that an oxymoron? Is that what that is? That doesn't make sense. Now, let's look at this real carefully, because no, I would not dare say that Esau is a good type of God. But I will say this, Jacob is a good type for us. He's a good representation of us. And here's his first approach. He's trying to earn favor, something that can't be earned. He's trying to earn it with gifts. Now, I told you that Maggie went and got me those burgers at McDonald's. What I didn't tell you was that before she left, I told her, I said, how much? Well, first I asked her, how much do you love me? And she knows anytime I ask that, well, you spouses know. When your spouse asks you that, something's coming. And I said, well, then, would you mind going and get me some burgers? I said, if you do, I will forever love you. And so she went and she got the burgers and she brought them back. And when she brought them back, I said, thank you, Maggie, because you did this. I now fully and permanently love you, and you have earned my favor. That's what I told her. She didn't know this, but that was a setup for tonight's message. I wasn't really hungry. That's why I did it. Sure. Right, but see what we do with the Lord? Are you guilty of it? Is that why you bring the gifts that you do to the Lord? Is that why you pray? Is that why you study? Is that why you give to the poor? Is that why you put your tithes in the offering? Do you do it to earn God's unearned favor? All right, now don't give up on Jacob. This is just the beginning. It's not over, right? So keep that in mind. Verse 9, but Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. Truly, Esau did have enough. He's pretty much a king of a city by this point. And we get to Genesis, I believe it's 36, we're going to see the genealogy of Esau, and you're going to find out he has a humongous family. He's a prosperous man. So he says, I don't need these things. I don't need these gifts. It's not why I'm forgiving you. It's not why you found favor in my eyes. Now look at verse 10. And Jacob said, no, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, not the way I expected to see your face, scowling, furrowed brow, fuming, steam pouring off the forehead. No, but inasmuch as I've seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God and you were pleased with me. Looking on your face was like looking at God. A sight for sore eyes, we might say. So relieved that your countenance to me was good. I could see it in your eyes that you forgave me. So now Jacob has shifted gears. Now this is all real subtle, so you have to look real close. But he shifted gears. His first intention was this: I'm giving you the gifts so that you're less mad at me. I'm trying to make it impossible for you to be upset with me. So I'm buttering you up. I'm giving you the gifts to get your favor. When Esau says that's not necessary, Jacob changes his approach and he says this, okay, if I have found favor in your sight, I still want to give you the gifts. In fact, now I really want to give them to you. But it's for a different reason, isn't it? The first time it was to earn something, but the second time it is a response to something. It's a response to grace. In this case, the grace of Esau. So now his giving is a response from that grace. His giving is from a place of thankfulness and praise. It's from a place of gratitude. And that is the difference between doing for the Lord in the right way and the wrong way. The wrong way to do it is this: Lord, look at what I'm doing. Lord, look how much I'm praying lately. Lord, look at how well I'm doing on this quest to read through the Bible. Lord, I read 5 chapters yesterday. I was only supposed to read 4 in my planner. I read 5, Lord. Lord, who wouldn't want to save me? Look at how well I'm doing. Right? I'm doing these things, Lord, and I'm expecting in return that I'm going to get your favor. You're going to look down on me because of what I'm doing, and you're going to be pleased with me. The Bible says that is absolutely not the way that this works. The Bible says that the way that it works is that you understand that your works, that your gifts, that your acts of service, that your prayer life, that your study life, none of that makes you more acceptable or more beautiful or more saved in the eyes of the Lord. And here's the punchline to it, if you will. Here's what the Lord wants. He doesn't want your gifts. He doesn't want you doing your duties and your obligations as Christians in order to have His grace. He wants to give you His grace first, and then He wants you from that place of grace to do what Jacob did and say, okay, I still want to give these things, Lord. I still want to serve. I still want to lift my hands in worship service. I still want to sing to you. I still want to pray. I still want to read my Bible. I still want to give to the poor. I still want to put my tithes offering in the offering plate. But Lord, now I'm doing it for a different reason. I'm not doing it so that you'll look at me and be impressed and give me grace. I'm doing it because I know I have your grace. I'm doing it now because I'm just grateful. And so you move from, it's so freeing. Oh my goodness, it's so freeing. It's one of the most freeing studies I've ever done in the scriptures, because now you move from that place of I got to now I get to. You know, if your religion is works-based, then here's your mindset. I got to do this. I got to keep these commands. I got to keep my prayer life going. I got to study through the scriptures. I got to give in the offering. But now it's no longer, once you've had grace and really understand grace, that it was given to you just because he loves you. Now you can say, it's no longer, I got to do these things. It's that I get to do these things. Jacob has learned that lesson here in Genesis 33. I hope you know it. What an incredible study here of restoration between these two. The rift between them was left unresolved for so long, 20 years. Let me say this. This is not a good New Testament map for forgiving people and solving differences between the two of you. Don't wait 20 years. You know what usually happens in 20 years? Upset and angry becomes a root of bitterness. I mean, a deep down root. Now, we know that the New Testament gives us a much better way to handle this. Not wait 20 years and then go back and hope that everything's washed over. But the Lord tells us in Matthew chapter 5, verse 23, he says, therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift. You see the immediacy of it? The necessary immediacy of resolving issues. Now, does this mean that we are to track down everyone that has a problem with us and fix it? I hope not. For some of us, that'd be a full-time job. We would have to quit our jobs. Kids would have to drop out of school. No, look at the key indicators in the passage. Here's what the Lord is saying. If you come into the place of prayer, and there in the place of prayer, the Lord speaks to your heart. That's what this is. That's the Lord in your prayer time bringing this to your heart. Oh, hey, someone's got a problem with you. You've offended someone. What are you doing here? Go make that right. And notice the issue is not, he doesn't bring up at all how to deal with the people that have offended you. Do you notice that? He doesn't say, if you come to the place of prayer and there you remember that someone offended you, you go track them down and get that taken care of. You demand an apology. He doesn't deal with that at all because he tells us what? As far as it pertains to people that have offended us or hurt us, what does he tell us in many other places? You just forgive them. That's it. But if you're in that place of prayer and the Lord speaks to you and says, hey, there's an unresolved issue here, then you get up right where you are. If you're in the middle of a worship service and your hands are lifted and you're singing, He has done great things, and the Lord prompts that on your heart, you leave this place, you go make that right. That's what Jesus is saying. Now is the time. So if we see some of you leaving before the end of the service, we'll know what's up. Now we're all going to be looking. So deal with it quickly. Don't do this. Well, when is the right? Okay, Lord, I'm in my time of prayer. I'm in the spirit of prayer. The Spirit is speaking to me. I feel you prompting me that there's a problem. Someone's offended by me, Lord. But when's the right time to go? Lord, let me pray about this for a week. Lord, give me a few weeks. Lord, maybe a month. Lord, let's see how that person feels about me in 20 years. Just like Jacob. No, now's the time. Get those issues resolved. That's what the Lord would say to you. Well, verse 11, Jacob says this, please take my blessing that is brought to you because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have enough. So he urged him and he took it. Did you catch what Jacob just said? He said, take my blessing. Why do I want to give you these gifts, Esau? This is my blessing. Take my blessing. What was it that Jacob robbed Esau of? The birthright and Esau's blessing. So now Jacob, who has stolen his brother's blessing, he says, take my blessing. I think it's an attempt at restitution. I think restitution's important. I don't think it's necessary for salvation. I think there are things that we forget. We don't realize the accounts that we haven't settled when we come to Christ. But when you know you've got accounts that haven't been settled, I think when you get Christ in your life, you need to have a heart like Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Jesus came to his house and had dinner with him. He had an experience with the Lord, and before the Lord was done in that house, he said, I'm going to go track down everyone that I have. If there's anyone that I have taken advantage of, I'm going to make it back with interest. I'm going to make restitution. It's a good principle. Verse 12, and Esau said, let us take our journey. Let us go, and I will go before you. Jacob, now that everything's mended between us, our relationship is restored, come on home. Come on back home with me. Let's travel together. Verse 13, but Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak. That is Esau. You know I'm traveling with young ones. And the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me. We've got baby sheep and little calves, also known as veal. I'm sorry, that's very inappropriate to insert in there. And he says, and if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. I will lead on slowly at a pace with which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure until I come to my Lord in Seir. So Jacob is living in Seir at this time. That is in Edom, which of course is also going to be Esau's name in the future, Edom. So it's down there by the Dead Sea. It is real close to Petra, the rock city of Petra, if you know anything about that. I think that's a very significant prophetic spot. We'll talk about that in the future. But that's where Esau is living right now at this time. And here's what Jacob has just said. No, you guys go on ahead. You got the 400 military men. You guys are all strong. You want to ride hard. Just ride hard. Go get home. Go get to Seir. And we'll be there as soon as we can. We'll move at a slower pace. And is that what Jacob does? No, he doesn't do that. He never gets there. It's interesting because if he knows he's not intending to go, he's just told Esau, you go home and I'll meet up with you. It's kind of like, don't call me, I'll call you. Let's do lunch sometime. We should get together. We should keep in touch, all those things. That's what he's doing. Now, if he knows he has no intention of going there, then he's once again lying. But maybe he does intend to go. Here's what we know. He never does go there. He never does get there. It could be that he doesn't trust Esau. It could be that he's thinking, wait a minute, Pops isn't dead yet. And he did make that vow, and that's making me nervous. When Pops does die, it could be that he's going to kill me anyway. This could be a ruse just to get me home. Or perhaps, and I think more likely, it's this. Jacob is just appeased that rift, that tension, that anxiety over that issue with his brother is now completely gone. He's just so happy about that. And he gets to just move on, He gets to move on. That peace has been made. I think maybe he knows what the Apostle Paul will write about in the future. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. I think he knows that. Him and Esau are once again close. The problems are gone. But here's the thing. They're not that close. Do you really see Jacob and Esau in a, livestock company together? No, I think I think Jacob is making a good move here. No, he is an unbeliever. I know he looks real good and real spiritual here. Esau's a big man right here, a forgiving man. We see a lot of great qualities in him in this moment. This is about it. You got to remember the Bible in the New Testament in Hebrews says no place was found in this guy's heart for repentance. He was not a repentant guy. And as good as he looks right now, you got to remember something. He's not saved. He does not know the Lord. And I think Jacob says, we're just not gonna mix and match. That's a wise principle for us. For Young men that are looking for wives, for young ladies that are looking for husbands, don't be unequally yoked. For people that you're going into business partnerships with, same thing. Don't be unequally yoked in those business partnerships. You know what happens when you take a horse on one side of the yoke and a donkey on the other side of the yoke. Because, right, a yoke is just one big, long shoulder board that comes across those animals. If you have a donkey and a horse yoked together, what happens? They're going to frustrate each other. And there's no way you're plowing a straight and productive line. Same thing if you have an ox on one side and a horse on the other, or an ox and a donkey. No matter what combination you use, you're going to get chaos and you're going to get a mess. It's the same when a believer and an unbeliever enter into a partnership like that together where decisions have to be made, a marriage, a business. How do you do that when you have two completely different perspectives on life? The believer sees the world through the Bible, but the world sees the world through the world. And there's going to be constant impasses. There's going to be constant rubs of friction there. It just doesn't work. Paul says avoid it. Avoid it. You need two people under the yoke that are the same. You need two believers yoked together in marriage. You need believers yoked together in business partnerships. Verse 15. We'll finish this up here real quick. And Esau said, "Now let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." He wants to leave behind some guys to help with protection, to help with the travel. Jacob says, "No, let's just not do that. You guys go. Just give me this one," right? Verse 16. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, or Edom, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house and made booths. That word booths is the word sukkah in the Hebrew, which is the word tabernacle or booth or tent. It's all the same thing. And that becomes an important word in the Old Testament and in the New Testament as well. Eventually the Lord is going to give them instructions and call to build the tabernacle, which was just a big tent, the tabernacle, the booth. There would be a feast of booths or feast of tabernacles. That would be one of the Jewish feasts. So this is an important word, but this is the place right now. This is the name of that city, and it's called Sukkoth, which means tabernacle, or we would say tent town. It's exactly what it means, tent town. But what does he do in tent town? He sets up a house, not a tent. That's breaking the mold. No one in the Abrahamic line has built a house. No, they're tent dwellers. The Lord called them to be pilgrims and sojourners, to wander through the land that the Lord was giving them, right? But Jacob breaks the mold in a place called Sukkoth, tent town, which is not in the promised land. It's about 80 miles away from where he needs to be. And he breaks the mold by setting up a house in Sukkoth. Interesting. Where's he supposed to be? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask Esau, he's headed to Seir. But we know that's not happening. If you ask the Lord, where's Jacob supposed to be? Hey, the Lord wants Jacob in Hebron, in Bethel, his home. Remember, that's what this was all about. When he was leaving Padan Aram, the Lord was stirring his heart to move home. Where's he at? He's not even in the land of promise right now. He's on a detour, and he's setting up a house. He's planning to settle down here. And truly, he would be here for anywhere between 6 to 9 years. He would be stuck here on this detour. Verse 18, then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan. So now he's back in the land, the promised land. That's a step closer. But a step closer to God's will is still outside of God's will, isn't it? The Lord will have to say in Genesis 36, verse 1, I believe it is, or 35, verse 1, the Lord will have to say, Jacob, arise and go to Bethel. Get where you know I want you to be. Right? So these detours are taking him out of the will of the Lord. And it says he pitched his tent before the city. These are steps of progress. He's moved out of the house. He's no longer settled down. He's back in the land of promise. He's getting closer, and he's back in a tent. He's not building a house again. He's making positive movements. Again, though, he's still outside of the will of God, and that's going to come back to bite him in the city of Shechem, isn't it? The next chapter is all about something that happens because of Jacob being in Shechem. Is Jacob acting like Abraham, or is he acting like someone else? Who's he acting like? Well, look at this. He pitched his tent before the city. Exactly. What was Shechem? Shechem was a wicked city, just like Sodom was a wicked city. And what did Lot do? He loved Sodom. He just kept inching closer to Sodom, and he pitched his tent toward Sodom, looking at the city, getting to see the city lights at night, getting to see the city life. Jacob has done the same thing here. The wicked city of Shechem, he's pitched his tent right toward the city. And that's going to cause him a whole lot of heartbreak in the next chapter as his daughter Dinah is raped by one of the men there in Shechem. It is best, church, to just be where the Lord wants you to be when he wants you to be there. Anywhere else you go, we've learned it from Abraham. We're seeing it now again with Jacob. Anywhere else you go, you could be just causing yourself a whole lot of heartbreak for the future. And look what he does here. Verse 20. He erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel, or El Elohe Israel. Sounds real spiritual, doesn't it? It means God, the God of Israel. It's great because Jacob's using his new name here, Israel. And he's saying, God is the God of me, Israel. And he builds an altar there in Shechem. But I have a problem with that. He's building an altar somewhere outside of the will of God. I don't think this is the place to build an altar. And I think a lot of Christians do that. They're outside of the will of God and they know it, but they try to make things more spiritual and soothe their conscience by building an altar in that spot, so to speak. I've had people say to me before something to the effect of, well, Arlyn, I know the Lord brought that woman into my life. Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, I know they're married, but we're really in love and she's going to leave him for me. And I just know it was the Lord. I'm so thankful that the Lord has brought her into my life. And I would say, no, the Lord did not do that. And I would say that is not the place to build an altar. That is not a thing to worship the Lord over, as if the Lord did that, as if the Lord is working in a situation to tear hearts apart and destroy a home so that you can have what you want. That's not the Lord. That's not a place to build an altar. I think we need to be careful where we build an altar. Let's not fool ourselves. When we're outside of God's will, when we're on our spiritual detours, when we're stuck in sin, let's not build our altars and worship the Lord as if everything is okay. Let's just get ourselves back to where we need to be. Get ourselves back into the land. Build our altars where it's appropriate to build them. Well, one last thing and we're closing here. This went way too long. But it's still only 7:40, so we're getting out on time. I want to point this out. So before we part like the Red Sea and go home, give me your attention for just 2 more minutes here. I want to point out to you the difference between Jacob and Esau. The New Testament knows what it's talking about when Jacob is honored as the man of faith and Esau is corrected or scalded for being the man of flesh. I want to point this out to you. You see it a lot, but here it's real clear. Verse 5, if you look at verse 5, concerning Jacob's family, we already covered this. We spoke about it. Here's what he said about his family. God has graciously given my family to me. God has graciously given my family to me. I didn't earn it. I didn't deserve it. If anyone you would think would take the credit for what they've done or what they've gained, you think it would be Jacob. You think he'd say, oh yeah, here, listen to my plan for how I got all these livestock options. Stock options, get it? Really poor attempt at a joke. Listen to how I did it. I did this thing with the striped stick. It was amazing. I just knew it was going to work. If anyone you would think would be telling you about how he schemed and how he planned to get everything that he got, you would think it'd be Jacob. But Jacob says, as far as my family goes, all gifts of God's grace, God gave this stuff to me. I didn't deserve it. And in verse 10, Jacob says this concerning his possessions and his wealth. He says, God has dealt graciously with me. Again, everything that I have is from the Lord. Now, what is this encounter about? You have two very wealthy guys that are both extremely blessed in the physical. And Jacob, in this chapter, has said 2 times, everything I have, I credit to God. They're gifts of his grace. Now, let me read you Esau's account of his possessions, his wealth, and his goods. Here's what Esau says in verse 9. I have enough. That's it. I have enough. I got a lot. Me. I did this. Now, it might seem like a small thing to you. It might seem like nitpicking, but I don't think it is at all. Because if you look at the life of Esau, this is exactly what you find everywhere. You'll never find the name of God on his lips. You'll never find him crediting God for anything that he has. And that's the difference between Jacob and Esau. Jacob has God at the center of everything. In spite of all his messes, he has God in the center of everything in his life. But Esau has no knowledge, no retention of God's knowledge. I think it's Romans chapter 1 that says that. There's a people group, the world, that do not want to retain God in their knowledge. They just want it all wiped out. You'll never hear them say, oh, I'm so thankful for this meal on my table. God gave this to me. I'm so thankful for my job. I'm so thankful for how that worked out. God did that. Are you that kind of person? Do you credit God with everything? It is my first thought anytime something good happens to me, anytime, no matter what it is. My first thought is, oh, God, thank you. And it's not just like a religious catchphrase that I use. It's the first thing that comes out of my heart. God, thank you. Something good happened in my life, Lord. Thank you. Other people would look at that and say, you're crazy. That was a circumstance. That was a coincidence. Why are you giving God credit? No, God does get the credit. That's the difference between Jacob and Esau. It's the difference between us and the world, I hope. So let's close with that. We'll just say this before we close. God is looking for those kind of people. He's looking for people that won't take credit for what they do or what they get. He's looking for people that will point to him with all the credit. He's looking for people that will recognize him working in their lives. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing God working in your lives? Are you seeing what he's doing? I mean, he is. He is. The question is, are you seeing it? Are you recognizing it or not? I hope you are.